and she needed support and help. But they hadn't offered that to her. They had only offered an abortion. We'll go to the next slide, because I want to keep us on track here. To give us a sense, when I say pregnancy resource centers, what am I talking about? Well, this map right here shows all these pink dots. These are all the free pregnancy resource centers in Wisconsin. And I know some of you have been to a pregnancy resource center, maybe you've heard of the ones in your area. But this shows how much the pro-life movement cares about women and their preborn children. And just quickly, again, to put numbers to this, we are talking about millions of dollars every single year and millions of women across the United States who find free support at pregnancy resource centers. And a fun statistic to think about is there are more than 2,700 pregnancy resource centers across America. And that's 3 times more than the amount of abortion providers in our country. But what are we up against? You know, we have to be prepared. If you're going to join me in being a pro-life activist and advocating for the value of life, I think we need to know what the culture is saying about life and be prepared to respond. So these are recent posts and ads from abortion providers that I got on my personal Instagram account that I thought would be good to share. So the most common form of abortion in the United States is actually through a pill. You don't even need to go in person to get it. You can order it online, and you don't even need to have a visit with a doctor or a medical provider. So that means I could right now go online, I could order an abortion pill, I could have it come to my house in a couple weeks, I could take it at home. But here's the problem. I might not know how far along I am in my pregnancy, and this pill is only approved through 10 weeks gestation when you're pregnant. And the problem is, during the current presidential administration, any safeguards for the abortion pill have been removed. So, of course, as a pro-life advocate, it would be my desire that no woman is ever taking the abortion pill. So we gotta, establish that as a baseline. But previously, women would have to go and see a doctor, make sure she doesn't have any underlying health conditions, ensure that she's below 10 weeks gestation and pregnancy, and have age verification, make sure that this is not a minor taking these pills. I'm here to tell you today, all of these safeguards have been removed in the last 3 years. So now we have women all across our country, thousands every single day, who are getting these pills in the mail that not only take the life of their child, but can cause devastating consequences to women. The amount of women that I've talked to personally who are devastated after seeing the loss of their child at home in the bathroom, no doctor present, no support. And this is what the abortion industry is currently pushing on women, that this is empowering. You can take it at home. If you want, you can order the abortion pill as part of a spa package that comes to your house with the pill. There's some snacks in there's a face mask, because it's supposed to be like a self-care day. So this is what we're up against. This is the message of the pro-abortion movement. It used to be that the pro-abortion movement would talk about safe, legal, and rare abortions. That's probably before your time, but even when I was in high school, that was the tagline, safe, legal, and rare. Now the tagline is abortion anytime, for any reason, no restrictions. And we see all across our culture. This is a poster from Olivia Rodrigo's concert that's going on now, where she is currently giving out abortion pills to attendees at her concert and raising money for abortion providers. But I want us to take a step back and think about, what does the pro-life movement offer women versus the pro-abortion movement? What's shocking is if we think about why women seek abortions, we actually see that, for example, 18% seek abortions because they're overwhelmed. Probably like my friend was in high school. It's overwhelming. Anytime you find out you're going to be a mom, it's overwhelming, even if you're excited. So that's a very normal response. Relationship issues, 26%, health concerns, 11%. The last section is timing. So we're talking about the vast majority of women seeking an abortion. It's not due to a devastating health outcome. It's not even due to convenience. It's due to issues where they may need support. Maybe they need a maternity home. Maybe they're living in an abusive relationship and they need encouragement and support. Maybe they're struggling to make ends meet and they need an emergency housing grant, which, by the way, is something that Wisconsin Right to Life does for women. So then, again, if we think about the abortion provider, and I want you to think back to the woman that I told you about who had 7 abortions and now has her baby after walking through the doors of the Pregnancy Resource Center. Abortion providers only offer one option to women. If you walk through the doors of an abortion provider or you order that pill through the mail, you're not going to get assistance if you're overwhelmed in your pregnancy, if your housing situation is unsafe, if you need help with job training, if you need diapers. None of that support is open to you. All you get is a procedure or a pill that ends in the death of your child and can cause lifelong pain for the mom. Versus the pro-life movement that says, we care about you and your baby. We care about what's going on in your life. We care about helping you and walking alongside you. The message of the pro-life movement is that we love them both, the mom and the baby. So, if you're with me and you want to join the pro-life cause, how do we build the argument? Because the most important thing about being pro-life is it doesn't mean you have to take it to the extreme like me, where you're talking about it all the time and being very public. I know that's not for everyone, and that certainly wasn't for me when I was your age. I was pretty shy about sharing my beliefs, and when I was in college at UW-Madison, I couldn't even get enough students to start a pro-life club. So I have felt very alone at many times in my life in being a pro-life activist. But I'm here to tell you that it's just about having conversations with people in your life. Maybe it's your friend who might be unexpectedly pregnant and hasn't even told you and just needs to feel supported and encouraged. Maybe it's a sibling, a classmate. I don't know who it is, but I think we all need to be prepared to articulate why we believe what we believe. So how do we do that? What does that look like? I love this photo because I think it tells us a lot about the pro-life movement. The message on some of these signs is, don't count me out, or chromosomes don't match my value or my love. And the reason I focus on this is over 70% of children diagnosed with Down syndrome are aborted in the United States. 70%. And in countries like Iceland, they recently celebrated in 2021 that they had, quote, eradicated Down syndrome in Iceland. The thing is, if you dig into that article, they hadn't actually eradicated Down syndrome. They just had a 100% abortion rate for children diagnosed with Down syndrome. Now, I'm sure we all know people in our life who may have Down syndrome. They may have another developmental disability, but we love them. They're an incredible part of our society and our life and our communities. And they're a big part of why I'm here talking to you today. They're a big part of why we advocate in the pro-life movement. For individuals with developmental disabilities, with Down syndrome, who are deserving of respect and love and protection. So let's dig into it a little bit more. How do we make this argument? Well, it's pretty simple on a moral level, but let's break it down. Our first premise, it's morally wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. I think we can all agree with that one. That's the easy one. Premise 2, well, that's exactly what abortion does. It intentionally kills an innocent human being. So then our moral conclusion is that abortion is morally wrong. Now, I know this seems painfully simple, and when we're actually discussing abortion with people, it doesn't go this way. But it's simple if you really think through what we're talking about. We're talking about innocent human life. But how how do we talk about this? Well, if you're into science and development, fetal development, we can start learning, for example, that from the day one, the moment of fertilization, a baby's gender, ethnicity, hair color, eye color, and all these traits are already determined. That's a human being from day one. Between 4 to 6 weeks, we start seeing a fetal heartbeat. And beyond that, the development in the womb is incredible. So I would encourage you to look into that more to give you some ammunition as you build your pro-life arguments. We can go on to the next slide. So, while abortion providers and the pro-abortion movement is telling you that abortion is a human right, I'm here to tell you that abortion is murder. And I know that that's hard to stomach. Sometimes it's even hard for me to say that. But if we don't call it what it is, we're not articulating the pro-life cause. These are some of my favorite ways to start a pro-life conversation with someone. Maybe they're on the fence, maybe they're not pro-life, but they're uncomfortable with, once there's a heartbeat, I think we should protect life. This is what I would pose to them. Do you value all humans equally? Do you believe babies in the womb are worthy of defense and advocacy, just as children outside the womb? Do you believe that people with disabilities are still deserving of respect? Do you believe that humans' value doesn't come from how old or developed they are? And finally, do you know that it's always wrong to kill innocent human beings? These are all powerful starting points for you if you want to engage in a pro-life discussion. Because I think most people would agree with all of these premises. But we have to talk through, well, what does that mean? What does that mean in the context of pro-life and pro-abortion? And put it a different way, the vast majority of women who seek abortions are from situations where they're living in poverty. The vast majority are women who come from minority communities. Many of them live in violent situations. So then we naturally have to ask ourselves, do we believe that lives are still deserving of love and protection, even if they were born into poverty, they were conceived in rape, they were placed for an adoption, or have a disability? So this is another way of looking at it. So at this point, how are we doing on time? Oh, perfect. At this point, I can open it up to questions. If you all have questions, which I would love, I love questions, and we can have a dialogue. But if not, we can go through some common arguments and how we overcome them. But I would prefer questions. So if we have questions, let's do it. Don't be shy. We have a question?
A lot of times when people get frustrated about the subject of pro-life, when you're talking to that person and they're really frustrated, how do you respond to a person who's frustrated, and how do you make sure that they're not blowing up?
That's such a good question. Now, I have to tell you, there's no perfect answer because I think we have to go into conversations knowing that this is an emotional topic for a lot of people. And something that I've found is, in my life, whether I'm tabling or speaking with friends, a lot of my friends who are the most angry and emotional about this topic is probably because they have a personal connection. So, for example, I've had some friends who, later on I find out that they had an abortion, or someone that they care about had an abortion. So, we always have to start our conversations regarding life with respect and dignity for the person that we're talking to. Let them know, I care about you, I respect your opinion, I know we might have different opinions, but let's, have a reasonable discussion. And this is the way I think about it. If we go into every conversation hoping that we can have someone walk away and be fully pro-life like I am, I'm never going to get anywhere. But if I can have a conversation with someone where we can at least agree, hey, a baby's heartbeat is beating at 6 weeks, do you think that we should protect life at that point? And maybe that's where I get them to, where that makes them uncomfortable and they have to think about it more. That's a victory. So that's how I try to think about it is, we're not going into these discussions necessarily to win every discussion. We might not win any of them, but we can open someone's eyes to a different point of view and have them thinking. And I've also had many friends who were very angry when I talked about life, and then years later I'll get the call, I'm pro-life now, and this is why. And my mind has changed. So sometimes it's the long game that we're playing. But that's a good question. Anybody else? Yes?
From a societal standpoint, why do you think abortion has become so normalized?
That's a great question. I think it's because, and some of this is on the fault of the pro-life movement, to be honest with you. We have to be honest about our shortcomings. We've lost the battle over how we talk about this in the culture. So, for example, the vast majority of Americans now believe abortion is a constitutional right. And that comes back to the Roe v. Wade decision. It never was a constitutional right. It was an incorrect decision. Even if there are people who support abortion, there have been justices on the Supreme Court who support abortion but say it was never a constitutional right. So that, for example, puts us back far, because once you have the vast majority of your society believing, I have a right to do this, and then we've removed terminology when we're talking about life. For the vast majority of people, they don't talk about a baby in the womb, unless it's a baby they want. So this is a good way of thinking about it. If you meet someone who's excited to be pregnant, they're going to talk about how it's a baby. But if we're talking about abortion, or abortion being a right, we don't talk about how that's a baby. We talk about how it's a fetus or a clump of cells. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that words matter. And also, it's convenience. We live in a society of convenience for good and for bad. So for a lot of people, abortion seems like an easier option than carrying the baby to term. So hopefully that helps. I love this. Keep the questions coming. Yes.
How do you think people should respond when I think a lot of men in our culture think that since I'm a man, I don't have a say?
I'm glad you asked. This actually, I was just talking with my mom about this because my youngest brother, he's now almost graduating college, so he's not that young anymore, but I've been so proud of him because he tables with the pro-life group on his campus, right? So he actually called me up this week and he said, my first time tabling was a disaster. I can't do this. So many people telling me I'm a guy. I feel like I have no role in this discussion. So I'm glad you asked because I'm here to sympathize with you. It's hard. It's a lot harder to be a man who articulates life and the value of life well. But it's so important because ultimately, this impacts all of us. We're talking about men who have a say if that's their child, and maybe they want to become a father. We're talking about girls and boys who lose their lives through abortion. So this impacts all of us, and having men who are willing to be supportive to the women in their life, whether it's their sister who maybe has an unexpected pregnancy, maybe it's a girlfriend, a wife, whatever that relationship looks like. I can't tell you, and this is important, so guys listen up. I can't tell you how many women come to a pregnancy resource center and they tell us, I want to have my baby, but my husband, boyfriend, father, whoever it is, doesn't. It is incredibly common that we hear that. So they say, I have to have an abortion because the father of the child doesn't want the baby. So as men, all you guys in the room, please join us in advocating on behalf of life. You never know who in your life needs that encouragement and needs that support, and it really does impact all of us. So, but I hear you out. It's tough. This is the same kind of talk I have to give to my little brother to get him out tabling again. Any other questions? Yes.
How do I discuss abortion with someone whose morals or faith don't line up with mine?
That's a really good question, and I'm not going to lie to you, that's probably the most difficult, because when you think about making our premise, it's hard to make a moral argument when someone doesn't have the same baseline morality. But that's where I would bring in things like, well, how do you feel about individuals with disabilities? Is there anyone in your life that you care about that has Down syndrome? And bring up the 70% statistic. That's where I've seen the most success with people who might not have the same baseline level of morality that I do. Because most people at the end of the day do care. They care about children in poverty. They care about moms in poverty. And you can also talk about pregnancy resource centers and the 300 million they provide in free services. Again, I'm not expecting you to know all these statistics off the top of your head, but that way you can help give a sense of, I'm pro-life because I care about people who are in these circumstances, and I know that you do too. And again, they might not get to where you might be, where you're fully pro-life, but they can at least see, hey, the pro-life movement is compassionate. They care about individuals with disabilities. They care about women, and kind of take the conversation from there. So that's what I normally do. Good question. This is great. More questions, please. Yes.
How many people get an abortion just because they're poor?
Well, it's hard to give the exact numbers because ultimately it's a privacy thing, so women can determine if they're going to share or not. But normally I would say we see, just from my personal experience, the vast majority of women at pregnancy resource centers in Wisconsin see are living under the poverty line. And the vast majority of these women have had abortions in the past. So if we're thinking about as a whole, who are the women that we're servicing in the pro-life movement, they're women living in poverty. And many of them have sought an abortion in the past because of that. So I think it's I think it's a big amount, but I wish I could give you clear data. We just don't have it because a lot of women don't feel comfortable to share that when they're having, choosing to have an abortion. So it's like a self-reporting type situation. I don't know if that helps. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
For women who are planning to follow through with the pregnancy but don't want to parent the child and give it up for adoption, what is their quality of life?
For the child or for the mom?
The child.
Yeah, so the thing about the pro-life movement is many people who are pro-life are also really passionate about adoption. So a lot of people who I work with personally have adopted children. And in Wisconsin and nationwide, the waiting list for parents who have qualified and want to adopt is really long. So there's no shortage of loving families and parents who want to adopt. I think ultimately there's always, pain and challenges when people don't grow up without their parents. That can be a hard and challenging thing to navigate. But ultimately, if we're thinking about that child, we would rather have them grow up in a loving home, an adoptive home, than not grow up at all. So, but that's a good question, and I think we have to be talking more and more about how are we making adoption accessible for families so that we do have loving families who are ready, and how do we make sure that it's transparent so that these are safe, loving homes. And I will tell you, many women who come to pregnancy resource centers do choose the route of adoption, and many of them are able to meet the families ahead of time, and it's a really smooth and wonderful process. But that's a very good question. In the back somewhere. Sorry if I can't see you, the lights are kind of... just go for it, yeah.
What is one time where you feel to persuade someone to keep their child or be pro-life, and what is your takeaway from that experience?
To be honest with you, like I said, if I think about failure as not convincing someone to be pro-life or not convincing someone to keep their child, I probably wouldn't be doing this job anymore. Because there is a lot of failure. There's more times than not where I walk away from a discussion feeling defeated and feeling like I didn't have the outcome that I desired. So the biggest takeaway for me personally, and the reason that I'm still here with you all today and doing this work, is that now I think of success in a different way. I think of it as, for example, if you'll permit me to tell a story, this is a good one. I was speaking at a high school last year, and you all have been respectful and lovely, but I'll tell you, at this high school, they did not want to hear me, and it was a very challenging situation. But at the end, I had a student come up and talk to me, and she was very angry and unhappy and really emotional, and it was a hard conversation. But I was so happy that she had the courage to talk to me, and it was, I left the school, and I called my husband, and I said, I never want to speak at high schools again. I feel like I'm back in high school again, and it's so terrifying, and I'm not getting anywhere, and I'm failing. Well, fast forward 6 months later, the principal from the school calls me and he says, I'm reaching out because I have a student who wants to get in contact with you. She wants to talk to you. Would that be okay? Can you talk to her and talk to her parents? So long story short, it was the student who had been really angry and emotional, and we had maybe a 25-minute conversation. So what I found out was that she was pregnant unexpectedly, and she had abortion pills at home the day that I came to speak, and she was planning to take them later. Well, she ended up not taking them, and she had her baby, and she wanted me to meet her baby, and she wanted to talk to me. So the reason I share that is we just have to think of it differently. We don't always get to see the outcome of our conversations, just like we don't always get to see the outcome of our prayers. But we don't know where the Lord is going to lead it. We don't know who needs to hear the message that we have, or when they need to hear it. Maybe they don't need to hear it the day that we give it to them. Maybe they hate it that day. But it comes back later, and it has an impact on their life. So honestly, I just think about success differently, or else I would feel like a failure, and I would not be doing this job. Okay, we've got a couple minutes left.
I have one here.
In the back, yes.
Is pro-life people against birth control?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for example, at Wisconsin Rights Life, we're the biggest pro-life group in Wisconsin, and we're affiliated with one of the biggest pro-life groups in the nation. And we take no position on birth control at all. So that's part of our mission at Wisconsin Rights Life, and I would say, to give you context, a lot of pro-life groups don't talk about birth control. Now, if you were to ask me my personal opinion, or people who are pro-life, it's going to vary depending on people's views and how they view birth control. But overall, that's not something that the pro-life movement is advocating for at this time. We're much more focused on the protections that we can pass. And that's a challenging argument to make culturally, and that's okay. It's not, I don't think it's the time for that argument. But that's a good question. I think I saw some other hands, and I might have looked away. Or if we got to everybody? Well, I think it was good. Well, thank you all so much for hearing me out. I know this is such a challenging conversation. I really do. I promise you, if you are pro-life right now, I've been in your shoes where I feel maybe scared to share my views, scared of what people will think. But I'm here to tell you that if you are the most worthwhile battles that you can be a part of, because we're talking about lives. We're talking about lives that can be saved and lives that can be changed. We're talking about women who deserve so much better than the lies of the pro-abortion movement. They deserve to be told that they can have their child, they can have their dreams fulfilled, and there is support and compassion for them. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the invite.